The earth was cracked wide beneath her knees, brittle and red, like it bled under the weight of all it had seen. Dust curled up in ghosts as the wind passed through the town's only street, scattering straw, memory, and dignity in equal measure. The sun hung low, not quite golden, not yet cruel, casting long shadows from wagon wheels and swinging saloon doors. She knelt alone in the dirt, her dress torn at the hem and soaked in breast milk and blood. Her arms curled around the bundle against her chest, where one of the twin girls slept quietly. The other wailed behind her in the dirt, where the townsfolk could see but chose not to look. Her hair, once thick and dark as wet bark, now hung limp and tangled, plastered to the side of her bruised cheek. The beating had been public. That was how her step-husband wanted it, an audience, shame, and a clean conscience. He dragged her by the wrist from the mercantile steps and called her barren of worth, though she had borne 2 daughters not 3 months past. Not boys, he'd said. Not seed-fit. Just girl burdens. And so the blows had come, open-palmed first, then knuckled. She hadn't screamed. She'd simply curled, like something already stepped on. Someone muttered that maybe she'd learned her lesson. Someone else laughed. No one helped. They rarely did for her. She was 26 but carried herself like an older woman, the kind bent by too many silences and the weight of invisible things. A widow, first. Then a wife again, not by her choice, but by contract, passed like property from a dead husband to his elder stepbrother. No kin to her. Just legal. Just cruel. The step-husband rode off not long after, kicking dust toward her without turning around. Said he'd be back when she'd learned to raise something worth feeding. She didn't stand. Just crawled the inch between her and her crying daughter, blood in her mouth, skirt trailing behind like a flag of surrender. She scooped the baby into her arms. Spoke nothing. Cried nothing. And then, he appeared. Not from the church. Not from the saloon. Not even from among the gawkers. He'd been leaning against the rail outside the blacksmith's, arms folded, hat pulled low over a face carved like canyon rock. His shirt was black, faded to ash in places. Dust clung to his boots, to his beard, to the silence that followed him. He walked toward her like the wind had given him permission. The woman saw the edge of his shadow before she saw him. She flinched, instinct tightening her grip on both children. But he didn't speak at first. He crouched, slow as if he were approaching a spooked colt, and set down a half-full canteen beside her. Then a bundle, wrapped jerky and cloth for the babies, a blanket rolled from his own pack. All without a word. She didn't reach for any of it. He looked at her then. Not at the bruises. Not at the blood. Not even at the twins. He looked into her, as though measuring how much breakage one woman could carry before she ceased to be called alive. And then he said it. "You're coming with me." Not loud. Not a command. Not pity, either. Just fact, the kind said by someone who'd made up his mind long before he opened his mouth. She stared. Around them, no one moved. One man chuckled and spat, thinking it a joke. A woman nearby muttered something about poor men and their strays. But the rancher didn't flinch. He stood and held out a hand, not to lift her, not to own her, just to steady if she wanted it. The baby in her arms whimpered. The other quieted, warm against her ribs. Still, she didn't speak. But she rose. It took her time. Her legs wobbled beneath the weight of pain and silence. But she stood, slowly, both twins now cradled against her chest. Her dress flared in the breeze, torn but dignified in the way only the broken can be. The man led her to a wagon just beyond the trading post, hitched with a brown mare that nickered softly at their approach. He didn't offer a boost. He just stepped back and waited. She climbed in, lips cracked, hands trembling, holding her daughters like they were the only honest things left in the world. Once she was seated, he climbed onto the bench, flicked the reins, and turned the wagon toward the valley road. No one stopped them. No one called after her. The town simply faded behind them, dust curling in their wake, carrying the weight of what it had refused to protect. For miles, neither of them spoke. The twins slept. She watched the way the reins moved in his hands, slow, deliberate, like he was used to gentling things. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask why she stayed so long, or what she'd done to deserve it. He didn't question what the babies ate or where they'd sleep that night. He just drove on. As dusk fell over the low hills and the sky bruised itself into purple, she turned her face slightly toward him. Not enough to be seen. Just enough to see. And in that moment, as the moon blinked open in the east and the last trace of town faded behind the horizon, something in her, something small and stubborn and long ignored, unclenched. Not hope. Not yet. But a kind of breath. A beginning. And the road stretched ahead. Morning bled slow and gold over the valley, spilling its warmth across grass grown wild and fences left unpainted. The wagon had rolled through the night, past thorn and thicket, past dried-out creeks and sleeping deer, until it turned down a road no one followed and arrived at a place built quiet. The homestead was plain. A sloped roof house, chimney leaning slightly, with vines that curled up the porch posts like fingers afraid to let go. A barn stood nearby, open-doored and half-shadowed, and beyond that, hills stitched with sagebrush, soft as a hymn. No neighbors. No roads. No watchers. He didn't speak as he helped her down. Just waited while she clutched the twins closer and stepped onto the packed earth. Her legs trembled still from the beating, but she stood upright, her eyes flicking across the place like it might vanish if stared at too long. He led her inside. The walls held warmth not from color, but memory. Worn wooden floors, a hearth made from stacked river stone, 2 chairs beside it that didn't quite match. There were no photographs. Just a single woven quilt draped over the back of a rocking chair, frayed at the edges, but whole. He showed her the room at the back. It smelled of cedar and faint perfume, like someone had once loved the air enough to leave it sweet. A wash basin waited on a low table. A small cradle stood in the corner. Dust-free, as if someone had prepared. "You can rest here," he said, voice low like it had forgotten how to rise. She looked at the bed. Then at him. He didn't meet her eyes. Just nodded once and turned, closing the door without sound. That first night, she barely slept. Not from fear, not this time. It was the silence. It was the way the house didn't breathe behind her, didn't creak or sigh. She lay curled around the girls, listening to their little lungs rise and fall, to the distant thump of a horse in the barn. When she woke, the sun was high and coffee was already boiled. He wasn't inside. She stepped onto the porch, baby swaddled close, and saw him splitting wood by the barn. Shirt off, back taut with sweat. Not young in the way men often are, but built like someone who knew how to carry weight, not just timber, but grief. He didn't wave. Just nodded. She nodded back. In the days that followed, the rhythm took shape. He worked the land. She worked the house. Not because he told her to, he never once asked her to cook, clean, or mend, but because stillness had always made her nervous. The twins grew louder, stronger. She found her hands moving with purpose again, stirring, washing, folding, humming. The bruises on her skin faded faster than the ones beneath it. Sometimes at dusk, he'd sit on the porch, one booted foot on the rail, and smoke from a slender pipe he packed with lavender tobacco. She'd rock the babies, not beside him, but near enough. They never spoke much. Words felt heavy, unnecessary. Then came the first break in pattern. The babies were restless. She hadn't slept in 2 days. One twin cried sharp through the midnight still, the kind of cry that cut straight through bone. She bundled both girls in a shawl and opened her door, and stopped. The light in the barn was flickering. Drawn by the sound, she stepped through the grass barefoot, the cold biting her toes. The barn door was half open. Inside, he held one of the girls, the quieter one, in his arms. She wasn't crying anymore. Just blinking up at him, entranced. He swayed slowly, large hands gentle around her tiny form, and he was humming something old, soft and low, with the kind of tune passed down by women long dead. The woman didn't speak. Just stood at the edge, hidden in shadow. He kissed the child's forehead and whispered, "You're safe here, little bird," before placing her back in the straw cradle he'd made near the tack wall. When he turned and saw her, he didn't startle. She stepped inside, silent. He reached out, took the second twin from her arms, and held her the same way. No questions. No permission sought. Just care, slow and true. She sat on a crate nearby and watched him with the second girl, eyes softening for the first time in weeks. That night, as they walked back to the house, she asked, almost afraid of the sound of her own voice, "Do you miss her?" He didn't ask who. He just said, "Every day." In the days that followed, something shifted. He started leaving fresh firewood by her door each night. She began setting 2 cups on the table each morning, though he never sat until the sun was fully up. They moved like stars in the same sky, orbiting, not touching, yet always close. Then came Miss Tilda. A knock on the door, brisk and sharp like disapproval. The woman opened it, twins bundled against her chest. Tilda stood with a basket of dried herbs and narrowed eyes. "So this is where you've gone," she said, voice sugar-laced and sour underneath. The woman didn't answer. Tilda pushed inside, as if invited, and looked around with judgment coiled in every glance. The man entered soon after, wiping his hands on his trousers, eyes narrowing at the sight of their visitor. Tilda turned to him. "People are talking," she said. "About you. About her. About the children." "Let them," he replied. His voice was calm, but his stance was iron. "They say she bewitched you. That she ran off with another man's girls. That you'll lose the ranch next." He only said, "Then let me lose it." Tilda left soon after, huffed and unsatisfied. The woman watched him as he bolted the door behind her. Her voice barely reached him. "You could have told her to take me. He looked at her for a long time. Then said, "I don't take in things I plan to throw out." That night, she mended one of his shirts. The black one with the frayed cuff. She left it folded on the bench beside the fireplace. Said nothing. And in the quiet that followed, the fire crackled softly between them, not for warmth, not for light, but as witness. They didn't speak of love. They barely spoke at all. But something, fragile and unnamed, had begun to root itself between the floorboards and the breath they shared. Not romance. Not yet. But a belonging. And belonging, in the wild, was rarer than gold. Still, neither of them knew how long peace would last. But for now, she slept. For the first time, deeply. With her daughters safe beside her, and the knowledge that no one would drag her from this place in the morning. Not while he stood guard. The rain came soft that morning, more mist than storm, soaking the porch rails and clinging to the grass like it didn't want to leave. She stood barefoot beneath the overhang, dress hem damp, holding one of the twins against her hip while the other crawled in circles through a puddle. The child laughed, a sound sharp and sweet and full of life. She smiled at it, that laugh. Not a wide smile, not yet. But one that lingered. From behind the screen of wet air, he watched. One hand resting on the porch post, pipe forgotten in his fingers. The woman turned slightly when she noticed him, not startled, not ashamed. She only nodded, like the silence between them was something they both understood. She began humming again that week, not lullabies, not yet, just notes. Low, tuneless strands of sound she'd hum into the baby's ears, or into the steam rising from the washbasin. He'd pass her with a bucket or a hammer and hear it, and though she never looked up, he knew the songs weren't for him. The girls were growing louder, braver. One liked to chew on chair legs. The other had taken to grabbing the man's beard when he held her. He never scolded. Just laughed in his chest and whispered, "You'll be a storm one day, little one." That made the woman look up. The first time she'd heard him call anything little. Something in her shifted. One evening, as the sun painted gold across the barn door, she spoke without prompting. "My first husband," she said, "didn't want children." The man was mending a broken harness at the time, fingers stained with oil. He didn't look up. Just nodded once, slow and patient. Said I was too quiet to raise proper. That love needed noise. He spoke then. Quietly. Silence is where things grow best. She didn't answer. Just turned back to her stitching, and the porch returned to stillness. A few days later, she brought him bread. Left it on the work table beside the window without a word. That night, he brought in a crate of apples, small, sour things from the tree behind the barn, and placed them near the fire, for the girls. Kindness, traded like currency that didn't require names. But not all visitors came with hands full. The preacher arrived late in the week, coat flapping in the wind like a flag too proud to lower. He was young, newer to the region, with a voice that always sounded like it was looking for a pulpit. He knocked once, sharp. The woman opened the door, twin girls peeking from behind her skirts. He smiled, lips thin. "I come in peace," he said. She didn't step aside. Just stared. The man arrived before a second knock was needed, stepping out from the barn, sleeves rolled, eyes unreadable. The preacher straightened. Spoke too loud for such a quiet house. "There's talk. A warrant might come through soon. Your guest here, she's being called stolen property. The law may side with blood over bruises." The woman's grip on the door tightened. The twins stilled, sensing something shift in the room. The preacher leaned in. Best to return her, gently. Before it turns less gentle. The man didn't speak. Didn't blink. Then closed the door between them. The preacher waited a moment, perhaps expecting more. Then turned, footsteps heavy with self-righteousness. Inside, the woman stared at the closed door. "You don't owe me nothing," she said. The man stared out the window, jaw tight. "Don't speak like you're a debt," he said. She moved toward the table, lit a lantern, her hand steady. "If they come, I'll go. I've gone before. I know how." He walked away then, not out of anger, but out of something heavier. She heard the barn door creak open and the sound of wood being dragged. Hours passed. She laid the babies down, then walked barefoot out into the night. The barn smelled of dust and rain-soaked hay. Lantern light flickered low. He was building something. On his knees, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hammer held like it had weight beyond iron. Wood slats, sanded soft, lined the edges of a cradle in making. He measured with care. Worked with reverence. She stood watching. "You never asked why I stayed," she said. He didn't look up. "Don't need to," he said. She stepped closer, voice barely above the rustle of straw. "I stayed because nobody made me feel safe. Not even the ones who said they loved me." He paused, hammer held still. "And now? Now I don't feel afraid when you're near." He sat back on his heels, eyes shadowed by the flicker of flame. "That's not love," he said. She shook her head. "No. But it's what comes before." He rose then, slow and careful, the way men move when their heart carries weight. He walked past her without brushing skin. At the barn door, he stopped. "I won't marry a woman out of rescue," he said. "Only out of truth." She nodded, voice quieter than dusk. "Then let it be truth, when it's time." That night, she left her door open a crack. Not an invitation. Not a test. Just a sign that she trusted the air between them. They didn't speak of what lay ahead. Not of warrants. Not of men with opinions. Not of things that might fall apart. But something had changed. The next morning, he found a scrap of paper near his plate. Folded twice. Her handwriting was neat, slanted. Inside were 3 names, the twins, and her own. He read them slowly. Then folded it again, placed it in his shirt pocket over his heart, and went back to work. Fog rolled in before dawn, thin and gray like a veil not meant to last. It clung to the valley like hesitation, softening the outlines of the barn, the porch, the hills beyond. Birds didn't sing. Even the horses stayed quiet in their stalls. She was already up, rocking one of the twins by the hearth, a shawl pulled around her shoulders. The other child dozed in the cradle he'd finished weeks ago, made smooth and sure by calloused hands. The fire snapped softly, the only sound in the house. He stepped inside with his boots still damp from the grass. A rifle leaned against his shoulder. His coat was buttoned, hat low over his brow. She looked up but said nothing. They hadn't needed words lately, not for mornings, not for worry. He gave her a single nod. "It's time," he said. She nodded back. Outside, wheels creaked over the road. Voices. 6 riders. 1 wagon. The preacher among them, and the lawman from Bitter Run, a hard-faced man who looked like he'd never known hunger, only judgment. At the front of it all rode her step-husband, mouth tight, eyes bright with fury. His coat flapped open, revealing a pistol holstered too proud. They pulled up before the porch, boots hitting dirt. The lawman stepped forward. "We're here on lawful ground," he said. "This woman was taken from her home under suspicious conditions. Her husband demands she be returned." No one moved. The man stepped down from the porch, slow, measured. He held no gun. Only his breath. The woman came to the threshold, twin girls tucked in either arm. Her shoulders didn't shake. Her eyes didn't lower. She spoke first. "This man beat me in public. Left me with blood in my mouth and babies crying in the dirt. I walked away. I stayed gone. That is my truth." The step-husband sneered. "You're mine by contract." "I'm no one's thing," she said. "Not anymore." The lawman turned to the man beside her. "You harbor her, you challenge the law." And finally, the quiet one spoke. "You want to talk law?" His voice cut through fog like an axe through ice, low, steady, but not gentle this time. "Then talk about the law that let a man lay fists on a woman for birthing daughters. Talk about a town that turned its back while she bled in the dirt. Talk about how no soul here, not preacher, not sheriff, not neighbor, lifted a hand for a mother holding her crying child." The air went still. The preacher opened his mouth. Closed it. The man kept going, his voice gathering weight. "You think I'll hand her over? You think I'll watch those girls grow up knowing the world called their mother a burden?" He stepped forward now, closer, his shoulders squared like stone. "No. She stays. She stays because she's braver than every man here put together. She stays because she never asked for saving, only for silence to end. And I'd sooner burn my land and stand in the ashes than let you touch one hair on her head again." The step-husband moved for his gun. He never drew it. The rifle was already in the man's hands, lifted clean and aimed without tremble. "You won't shoot me," the step-husband spat. The man didn't blink. "I don't miss." The lawman stepped between them, one palm raised. "Enough," he said. "Ain't worth blood." The preacher turned his horse, scowling. The others followed. The step-husband, snarling, spat at the ground. But no one rode with him when he left. Not even the lawman. Dust rose behind them like retreat. And in the silence that followed, she exhaled for the first time that day. Inside, the girls were stirring. She turned from the porch. He followed. That night, they didn't talk. They didn't need to. She placed the twins in their cradle. He sat on the floor beside them. She knelt beside him. They didn't kiss. Didn't confess. They simply rested their foreheads together. And in that quiet, something whole was born. Not victory. But peace. A year later, 2 toddlers ran through sunlit grass, chasing chickens. She hummed while hanging laundry on the line. He hammered a new post for the gate. On their fingers, simple rings glinted, silver, quiet, worn smooth by time and love that asked for nothing but presence. And the porch still creaked beneath them each night. And the cradle still sat by the fire, though the girls had outgrown it. And no one called her a burden anymore. She belonged now. And so did he. And if the wind ever carried whispers from the town, rumors or warnings or old anger, it never reached them. Because some homes are built stronger than wood. Some promises are made in silence. And some love, the truest kind, never needs to shout.